Well, hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to you. So, good news in the Sangha. Justina, she gave birth to a little baby boy, and she did so quickly, swiftly, and naturally. And so we're real happy for her. And so let's just take a moment, everyone, and let's just send some love. So you can hold up your hands and send some love to Justina. She's in Nashville, North Carolina, and to Michael and their new baby boy, just sending them lots of love. May they be blessed millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of times. Yes. Well, how beautiful. How beautiful. How beautiful. So, the next thing on the list is we have a retreat beginning next weekend, Friday, August 23rd through the 25th. We'll be exploring the 7 chakra centers. And so I've been attempting to look at the chakras again from a new angle and new light, and just seeing if there's some more information and more a different transmission that will come through. So I've been putting it out there to God, and the divine has been revealing some things to me, and that's been nice for me. Nice for me. Sometimes I feel like I teach the same things over and over again each week, and but of course, like we're all in kindergarten here on planet Earth. We're all learning and growing together. And so, yeah, I do hope you can join the retreat, and I'm sure it'll be wonderful. I'm sure it'll be wonderful. So, okay. If anyone needs a last minute scholarship, you can hit me up. Uh, but don't wait till the very last minute because I'll be busy teaching. And just please sign up sooner rather than later, because we're in Mercury right now still for another couple weeks, and Mercury has really done a number on me and my household, and, and a number of people in the Sangha have shared some really fun and wild, bizarre stories. And with Mercury, often its communication is off, or it's confused. We start tripping over what people say, and we start thinking about what they say in our minds, and we can make ourselves crazy and creating a whole story around people, and around what they said or what they did. And if that's you, I'm going to encourage you to unplug from that. In fact, over the next number of months, as we have this increasingly divided world and a political world, to really see if you can relax your political ideologies and to soften your worldview. And I always think it's a great exercise. It's just to sit back and listen to the other side, to listen. I can remember back when Donald Trump was elected the first time, and I was so shocked. I was enraged. I had friends who I just had absolute fury with, because they'd voted for this character. And it took me probably 5 years to actually sit down and listen, like to truly listen to someone, and to share, what their view was. And the key word was listening, because I had 5 years of thinking that I need to tell this person that they are wrong. I need to take the truth and shove it down their throat. And, that's not the way to live. It's not the way to live. If we want to live in righteousness, we're going to find ourselves very much alone. Very much alone if we make demands of people. And I saw that within myself, that I was making all kinds of demands, that people absolutely agree with my perspective first. in order for me to sit down with them. And that's not how we make peace. It's not how we make peace. And, I say all kinds of things each week, and sometimes I say some things that upset you. I'm going to invite you to see if you can make peace. Make peace with what I've said. And if not, there's an open door. You can head on down the road if you cannot make peace. If you can't make peace. And, some people send me corrections each week of what I should say and how I should speak. And it's a funny thing to live in this day and age. In a sense, a lot of people are terrified to open their mouth anymore because, so many people are just waiting on edge to cancel them, to throw them out, to call them wrong, to re-educate them according to their own perspective. And again, like, this can't be the way. This cannot be the way. And we can try this way, but we'll see we just have an increasingly divided world. And one of the most difficult things for any human being to do is to see their own conditioning, to see it, to be able to witness one's conditioning, and to be able to witness one's egoic fixation, especially a fixation around the need to be right. And there's this funny thing that happens. The more fully rooted one is in the depth of your being, the less you need to be right, the less you need to prove anything. Because there's a basic trust in life, a basic trust that it is okay for people to be people, for life to be life. It's okay. But when we're in our head, it's not okay. Nothing is okay. It's not okay what people say, what they do. We need to silence everyone. We need to re-educate them. And it starts to sound like an authoritarian dictatorship. And we have to be really careful at this moment in history how divisive we become. How divisive. And often the people who think, they are standing up for social justice, think they're standing up for the truth or this or that, the ones that are the most righteous, well, are actually the ones who are the most divided. And this conditioning that we all have conditioning. We have to really learn to forgive each other if we're going to get along here on planet Earth for our conditioning. We have to learn how to tolerate and just to listen. After I sat down and I listened to a number of friends who were Republicans and who, had voted for Trump. When I sat and I just listened, I realized, oh, okay, yeah, I can see your perspective. I understand that. I can see how that makes sense to some degree. To some degree. Now, they didn't ask me what I thought, but that's okay. Like, I'm going to start with the olive branch and say, okay, I'm going to listen and see, what do you have to say? What do you have to say? And I can say that I learned a lot. And as I continue to listen, then my conditioning will shift and will change and grow and morph. And then sometimes I'll make mistakes, based upon, a different type of conditioning. And that's all this world is, just one giant conditioned space. One giant conditioned space. from one perspective. And then from a different perspective, we step way back. We see, oh, it's all God. It's all divine. All divine. I can remember this story that I heard from Eli Jackson Bear, the spiritual teacher. He's the one married to Gangaji. And he met his teacher, Papaji. And many of you know Papaji from the nondual tradition, from Ramana Maharshi's lineage. And Papaji, well, he was an 8, like if we follow the Enneagram. And Eli Jackson Bear, he's an 8 also. And so, Eli was a student. He went to Papaji and he had this profound awakening. And then after his awakening, Papaji would talk politics with Eli. And Eli was like, he is a bleeding heart liberal, just immensely liberal individual. And Papaji, I'm not exactly sure what his politics were, but he had this sense of the way Eli put it. And I don't know if this is the truth, because again, it's coming from the conditioning of Eli, but Eli spoke about Papaji as being this racist, and that he hated Muslims and this and that. And he just couldn't ever come to peace, couldn't come to understand how his teacher had these views. And we all have views, and we all have conditioning. And Eli, I don't know if he studied history or not. I don't know if he studied the history of India, and how once the Hindus and the Muslims got together, got along quite well before the British came. And the British came and sowed this division. They used to do this game of divide and conquer. And so the British would take a minority group, which were the Muslims, and empower them. And so the British made the Muslims like the police force. And then, there was this this upside down or backwards power dynamic that the British used to divide the people. Well, you divide them and you conquer them. Now, many years ago, the Russians, like they learned this tactic also. Of course, the United States plays this tactic as well, but the Russian cyber warfare team started to sow seeds of division here in the United States. And many of us have drank from this cup. And we don't really know it. It shows up in little Facebook bots and people on Twitter and this and that, who write these articles and try to get people to fight about Democrats and Republicans and Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, and far right wing, Christian conservative groups, and climate change, global warming, all these types of things, try to get us to fight. Because a culture that is divided is a weak culture. It's a weak culture. And we have to be willing to look out at the world and see and understand why our friend thinks the way they think, why their view is the way it is. And we can't just look at them and say they're wrong, they're bad. I know. And they don't know. This is not the way of love. This is not the way of peace. We have to be willing, like the Buddha taught, to sit down and have a cup of tea. Sit down and have a cup of tea. But in order to have a cup of tea, we have to leave our hubris at the door. Let's leave our righteousness at the door. Because if not, we'll just play that game of trying to convince someone they are wrong. and they are now canceled. They're canceled. They're wrong. They're not allowed to have their view. And I believe this country had one of its tenets, its core tenets of free speech. But, that free speech is wonderful. But oftentimes, what we might need more of is free listening, listening with an open heart, not a condemning heart. And so, when you look out at your neighbors, I have these two neighbors. One's, crazy, all about Trump, and the other one is, all about Biden. And they've known each other for like 50 or more years, 50 or more years. But they quit speaking when everyone's friend Donald got elected last time. And it wasn't that the Republican quit speaking, it was the Democrat that quit speaking. She said, no, I will not talk to him. I won't make eye contact. Sometimes I see them out there together and I can see see one of them turns really red and her blood starts to boil with hatred. And it's unfortunate because I'm friends with them both, but the guy who voted for Trump, he's like the nicest guy on the block. He's the person you want to be friends with. When it snows, he brings out a skid steer and he will shovel your driveway and your sidewalk. Like, he's made piles of snow in my front yard that are about 12 feet high. 12 feet high. So if you imagine shoveling snow, 12 feet of snow by yourself with a shovel, that's a lot of work. And I'm happy to be friends with him. I'm happy to be friends with him. And he can talk. He can talk. He can talk. He talks politics with me a lot. And I listen and I listen and I listen. And sometimes I do have to run away, I'm like, okay, I gotta go get my daughter now. But I listen, I listen. I listen. And he's a beautiful man. He's a beautiful man, even if he does wear a shirt that says, "Let's go, Brandon." He's a beautiful man. And I even saw this documentary on Netflix the other day, and I just watched a little bit of it. But it was the life of Donald Trump, and I made it through an episode or two, and it was really interesting just to see how he's wired, like the way that boy is wired, and what drives him, what makes him the kind of fella that he is, And it was interesting to watch it, and to watch it without hatred, but just to watch it and just to see and to listen. It's funny, this character Trump, he's people either love him so much or they hate his guts. And I'm always amazed at individuals like that, who have such a following or such hatred about. I say, well, what is it about him? And what is it that he has to offer? Like, what do people truly like? And I think it's important for us to really understand our fellow man, our fellow human beings here on planet Earth. But in order to understand another, often we have to understand ourselves. And so with tonight's teaching, I'd like us to look at a psychological theory with a terrible name. Like, I hate the name of this theory. I had the same theory and I've been teaching it for a long time. And then I realized, oh, there's a prominent psychological theory it's got a terrible name. And it's called objects relations therapy. Theory. And it goes something like this. If we could, I'm going to invite us just to work with this experientially. And so if we could close our eyes, and if we could just think back to what our first relationship was like with our parents. What was your relationship like, your first relationship with your parents? What was that like? So we'll just take a moment and reflecting inside on our conditioning. What was your relationship with your parents like? Did you have basic trust with them? Did you feel safe? Did you feel supported? Did you feel loved and held? Or did you feel something else? Did you feel beat up or ostracized or abandoned or neglected? Did you feel suffocated, codependent? Did you feel that you had supreme neediness? What was your relationship like? So we just take a moment and we see our relationship. And I invite you to expand out a little bit. Like maybe you had great parents, but maybe you had a creepy uncle. Like many of us had like a creepy uncle or alcoholic uncle or brother who was on drugs or was mentally ill, or family member who was mentally ill. And so we'll just kind of expand our worldview. Just imagining again being a baby and just having this energy in the house, like whatever the different energies were. And then I invite you just to take a moment and to see how those energies affected you, especially in regards to a sense of safety and a sense of basic trust. How did those views affect you and your ability to trust in life and to trust in God? How did those views affect you? What does that have to say about your relationship with God, your relationship with other human beings? This is a very important investigation to look at because many of us feel deeply unsafe in the world, deeply unsafe, deeply scared, or sometimes we have neurotic neediness. And again, like I told this story earlier in the summer, but I was hanging out with some friends and they were all from the same culture and had this they had some kind of cultural game of nitpicking each other all the time. And when I was with these individuals, when I was just with one of the individuals, she would nitpick me. She just nitpicked me all the time. And I created a whole story in my head what was wrong with her, how mean she was, how she didn't like me, how she didn't respect me. And then when her family came to town, And her culture, when her culture came to town, I saw that they all nitpicked each other. They all complained about each other. They all just gave each other a hard time. These little jabs, and they all just kept doing it again and again and again. And I realized, oh, this isn't personal to Craig. Like, this person doesn't like me. In fact, when I stepped back and looked from a real vast view, I saw, oh, like they're having fun. Now, it wasn't fun for me because I wasn't used to being attacked every time I walked in the room. I wasn't used to that, attacked with words. Now, if you attacked me with like a strangle or something, like some jujitsu or something, I would think that was great. I'd be like, oh yeah, let's do it. I love to wrestle physically. I love to fight physically. Like, I love it. I enjoy it. But if you attack me with your words, I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense. The family I grew up in, we did not attack each other with words. Now, my brothers, we all attacked each other with our hands, but we saw that as a form of love, but we didn't attack each other with words. We didn't do that. We didn't do that. And what I'm inviting us to really look at is how our conditioning, looking at objects, relations theory, how our conditioning of our primary relationship when we were just little kids imprinted us with this idea that the world is safe or it's not safe. That the world is a place where I can get my needs met easily, or the world is a place where my needs never get met. Now, some of us, we have a complication here. We have this imprint that was mixed with games. And so our needs were met if we played the game. And there's a number of people in the Sangha that I've worked with who had to learn how to play the pleasing game to get their needs met. And so they learned that as long as I please, my needs will be met. And so when they grew up and they stepped out of that household, when they stepped out of that conditioned context, they continued to please. But their needs weren't always met. They found out that they were taken advantage of. And I really want us to look deeply together at what your initial imprint was. And I'm going to invite you to see, how do you project this imprint onto God? Onto God. Again, if we had neediness, do we project neediness onto God? That I'm not strong enough to live here on planet Earth? Do I project my neediness? If we were a frustrated child, because again, our parents didn't take care of us, do we project that frustration onto life? Onto life. If we had parents or sibling or who had mental illness, again, like, how does that affect our basic trust? Basic trust in life. If we haven't had our basic trust challenged in this world, like let's say you had perfect parents and you grew up as a very trusting kid and a trusting adult, I'm going to tell you, if you haven't had your basic trust challenged in a massive way, well, you just haven't lived long enough. You just haven't lived long enough. It's one of the confusing things about this world is there's things that happen here on planet Earth that we can't zip up and put in a nice little tidy box. When you see a school that's bombed, there's no way you can put that in a nice little tiny box. When you see a child die of leukemia, you can't put it in a box. When your best friend lies to you, or here's a fun one, when your spiritual teacher has different politics than you, what are you going to do? What will you do? And that one's, hopefully that one's a lot easier than the other ones. But with the big questions in life, it's like, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen at all? We're not going to find a quick answer to that. And so in this world, our basic trust in life will be challenged. Now, some of us, it's challenged right out of the gates. As soon as we're born, with a mother who suffocates us and who uses us, as a tool to get her own needs met or to make herself feel special, or, who knows. Sometimes we have these mothers who they swallow a child up, Don't allow the kid to be who the kid is meant to be. Sometimes we have, parents who get addicted to drugs or alcohol, and they're just not available. And this really challenges our basic trust. I can tell you that if you want to be free, if you want to be awake, you must be deeply rooted in a basic trust in life. But that doesn't mean that life will always give you what you want. In fact, really what basic trust means is that you trust life on your best day and on your worst. You trust in life, and you trust in your friends. You trust in humanity, even when you see the horrors of humanity. And my God, is that hard? My God, is that hard? To continue to trust in humanity after you see the war and the violence, the pillage, and the destruction of our planet, to be able to trust in humanity, to be able to trust in God that this ship is headed somewhere. It's very difficult, very challenging. But we must know, in order for us to inquire from a place of truth, we have to be willing to look. What was our first relationship like? Because if our relationship was, let's say, very messy, so on a scale of angelic to very messy and just totally effed up, it's very hard for us to inquire or to meditate, to do anything on the spiritual path. If our core perspective is I cannot trust. Because when an individual says, I cannot trust, there's a funny thing that they do. They do trust, but they trust in their insecure mind. They trust in their ideas, which are based in defensiveness. Again, if we have the really difficult object relations, if we had a really difficult childhood, I think a sweeter way of saying that. Again, I think it's a terrible name for a theory, object relations theory. But this imprint, this imprint affects how we see all of reality. So this is a core investigation for us to look at. To look at. Some of us, our parents taught us literally that we are unworthy. So we go our whole life. I'm unworthy. I'm no good. I have to be last. I'm probably wrong. Some of us, have the imprint, the blues singer, nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. And again, like that's a real typical on the Enneagram. That's a 4, a 4. Like no one has suffered as much as me. No one knows what it's like to suffer like I do, like I do, like I do. And so it's an interesting thing to look at this and to continue to look at it and to continue to look. Because sometimes, again, like you had great parents, no big deal. But then your best friend and business partner steals all your money. And so in a moment like this, what do we do? What do we do? How do we look out at life when someone deeply betrays us? Deeply betrays us. Are we going to trust again? Or are we going to close down forever? Are we going to build up a massive fortune and build ourselves a castle on a hill and make a moat around it and say, no one's going to rob me again. No one's going to get to me again. But then we live there in our own loneliness. In our own loneliness. And so it's important for us to really look and ask, what was my primary relationship? How do I project that onto reality? And then what does that thing need in order to heal? What deficiency is within me? So with true nature, there is zero deficiency. But human nature veils true nature. And so if our human nature has a massive veil, a massive wound, we have to do something about that. But one of the things that we've learned to do culturally is not to do our own work, but to blame another. And so to develop trust, we say, I need you to change first before I can trust you. And when you do this, when you make this demand upon life, you make yourself quite weak. Quite weak. I encourage you instead to find your truth, your strength, your power. To find that which in you is the very thing that cannot be destroyed, that cannot be harmed, the thing that is not needy, not frustrated, not bickering, not attached this way or that way. It's a very important investigation. How do you project your primary childhood relationships with your parents onto God, onto life, onto friends, onto family, onto spiritual teachers? Like many people, they tell me they project a father role on me. I say, I am a father. I don't mean this offensive, but I'm not your father. I'm not your father. I'm not your father. I am a father, but I'm not your father. And I did this with my teacher. Like my father dropped the ball in many ways. And so I projected the father role onto my spiritual teacher. It's not like the worst thing to project. But there were times when I wanted him, I needed him to be different. But his job as my teacher wasn't to serve my egoic neediness. His job was to get out a sword and show me how my neediness was not the truth. It was a relative egoic truth, but it was a truth that I needed to take care of myself within myself. It wasn't something that he needed to solve for me. In fact, if he did, he became a poor teacher and I became dependent upon him. And so there are many times I wanted him to show up and be the father that I didn't have. And occasionally he did from a place of truth. But as soon as I became dependent upon it, he'd make himself unavailable. And that taught me how to stand on my own 2 feet, taught me how to take care of myself and trust myself, to nurture my own self, to be my own father. And rather, in a deeper way, to be the Buddha that I look to, And so it's a very important thing for us to look at this. It's this projection and then the accompanying deficiencies. And again, with almost all of us, and we project our deficiency onto the world. And we tell the world, I need you to be different. And the world tells us, I need you to grow up. I need you to grow up. I need you to grow up. Now, we don't like that teaching. That's harsh. It's not sensitive. This is not a sensitive world we've incarnated into. Not incarnated into a sensitive world. We've incarnated into a harsh world with a very harsh reality. And when you accept this harsh reality, there's a funny thing that happens. you begin to see how absolutely beautiful this world is. Absolutely beautiful. Well, I heard this story, and you're gonna have to forgive me. I believe it's from Alan Watts, is the origin. And this lady came to to Alan, and she was in an elevator. I don't know what happened, but somehow she got her foot stuck in the elevator, and she's just being like crushed, like her foot was being crushed, being mangled by this elevator. I love dramatic stories like this. And at some point, she realized, she's just like, I'm stuck. There's nothing I can do. And within her, something woke up. And she saw that everything in this world is exactly as it should be. Now, that, my friends, is a basic trust. That is a basic trust. Everything is exactly how it should be. Now, kind of story that people like is, she was in the elevator, her foot got crushed. She said a prayer to an angel, the elevator got lifted, and she woke up the next morning and she ran a marathon. Like, that's the story that her ego wants to hear. That it all worked out perfectly. But here's a news flash for you. Like, here on planet Earth, some things will work out and a lot of things won't, will not work out perfectly. And can we accept this? Can we accept this? Can we accept that in this world, things fall apart and they end in disaster, and then they compost and something new grows? And something new grows that was much more beautiful than before. But oftentimes we need things to fall apart. And the thing I'm inviting for you, this day, is, if you have beliefs about your neighbors being wrong on the political spectrum, can you allow that thing to fall apart? Your thing, your dogma, your view. Can you let your view fall apart? Can you allow there to be space for this world to be as it is? To be as it is. And then, of course, one day, I'm sure we'll all wake up here in the United States, November, whatever. You'll still send in your ballot or stand in that line and this and that. Cast your vote. But can you accept this world as it is? Can you trust in it? Can you trust that despite the chaos and the confusion, the tragedy, if you look out at life, it appears as if this mysterious force of evolution is still in charge. Is still in charge. Is still running the show. Can you trust that God is the doer? God is the doer. And God might need a little help, a little help, That's our conscious participation. But a lot of times, the biggest help that God needs is for us to get out of the way. And God doesn't even need that either. Because if we don't get out of the way, God will push us out of the way. Will push us out of the way. And so, anyways, I'm really going to invite us again to sit with this over the next week or so, to look, to examine how our core beliefs, our core imprint in life, how it distorts reality. Now, I'm going to tell a story. I have to tell a story because it's just too funny for me. But once upon a time, I was in my office. Again, I told the story last time about how I had an office once. People used to come to see me, and a fella came to me. I can't tell the story. It's too crass. I'm sorry. I'm gonna censor myself now. I'm not gonna allow myself free speech. People tell me some crazy things. I'll just say this. People tell me some crazy things, and sometimes they tell me things of sexual nature. And this young fella, let me see if I can walk around the story a little bit. This young fella got an imprint. Is very true with biology with young boys, but when a young boy has their first interaction with something, let's just say the sexual nature, they're imprinted with what that is. And that imprint is very hard to shift. And so he had a very, very strange, bizarre, just like humorous imprint. And he grew up and he got married and this and that. And he would tell me that he would have to think about this very, very bizarre thing in order for his bits to work. For his bits to work. And it was so funny and so bizarre. He had a good laugh about it, and I got to have a good laugh about it. And sometimes with our conditioning, we have to have just a humility and a willingness to laugh, a willingness to acknowledge that life and having, like, being a divine being, but incarnating into a body, and a body will be conditioned and conditioned and conditioned over and over again. Over and over again. And that conditioning we can't control when we're young. We can't control it. We receive it. But one of the greatest gifts, and this fella, he was so humble. But one of the greatest gifts is this willingness to laugh at his own conditioning, to laugh at it, to smile, to acknowledge. He even acknowledged, he's like, this is really strange. Like, this is this strange thing that I have to do first, and I have to get this image in my head, and it's just a crazy thing. But for many of us, we're not humble with our conditioning. We either guard it with our life and have just this assumption that I know the truth of how life should be. And we guard it with our life, or we deny it. Again, with our life. Because when you deny your conditioning, if you do something, for example, like deny your neediness, well, guess what? You become a radically needy human being here on planet Earth. You become what one spiritual teacher friend of mine called a pain in the ass. A pain in the ass. Because you project your needs onto everyone around you. And you're always angry and fighting with them, demanding that they be different than how they are. And so let us all close our eyes. Let's open our hearts more fully. Let us invite our heart to expand, revealing to ourselves our true nature, a nature beyond conditioning, a nature that is boundless and free, a nature that has no problem, a nature that is whole and complete, a nature that is big as the sky, as deep as the earth. A nature that is absolutely innocent and pure. A nature that is so utterly beautiful. So utterly beautiful. And my, what a remarkably different nature this is than our conditioned sense of self. And so I'm going to invite you to make a choice right now. From which space do I want to live? Do I want to live for my needy, conditioned self? Demands life to be different? Or am I willing to live from this vast, eternal love that has no end? And so much love to each of you. Thank you all for the beauty and the light, the love that you are. Good night, everyone. Good to be with you. See you next time.